Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to episode number 10 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And I'd say it was a pretty quiet week on the transactions front, wouldn't you?
Yeah, just 3 trades this week. 2 minor prospect for pick swaps by me, and a whopping 7 second rounders were exchanged between the Will Smith and the Stranglers of Stanton, as it is written in our trade log. I don't really think any of those trades merit going that deep into, but I know there are a couple rumors this week that have come about, so maybe we'll be seeing a flurry of trades coming soon.
Yeah, sure. When there's nothing going on, I think it's perfectly reasonable to dive into crazy rumor season.
Yeah. There's rumblings that Alex is willing to trade Brendan Rodgers and Royce Lewis, and that he's very interested in acquiring some more draft picks. So for you all who want to take advantage of a couple prospects whose maybe stocks aren't the highest at the moment, but have shown a lot of potential in the minors and have been very high on somebody's prospect list. I mean, I think both have been top 10 prospects on a lot of credible lists in the past. Now seems like a good potential opportunity to buy. I know we have a Rockies fan in the league who I'm sure would love to get his hands on Brendan Rodgers. I've also heard that Jake and Clayton might be one of the more active teams this month. And I know one of their targets is a Red Sox pitcher. I know they really like Chris Sale. Maybe they're able to swing a trade with Andrew. I think that would make sense, kind of given both of their competitive timelines. And I know they're also still interested in Eduardo Rodriguez. They offered me Kyber Ruiz and a 3rd-round pick for Erod back when I had him. And I almost actually tried to close that deal and then send Kyber to Alex in the Woodruff deal, but then Alex wanted Erod more, so I just shipped Erod off to him. So maybe there's an opening there. And I know I am personally still discussing quite a few trades and trying to explore every avenue to upgrade. So who knows? We've seen 63 trades so far, which is a crazy number, especially considering last offseason we had 55 trades. And last offseason was also extended by like 3 months because of COVID. And we're only like 2 months into this offseason. So I think on one of our first episodes, I predicted that there would be 70 trades this offseason. And I think we are well on pace to shatter that number. I'm loving this so far, but hopefully we could see some more action in the upcoming days.
Yeah, I think, hopefully something starts swirling because right now it has been quiet. Let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into a couple of those rumors. First of all, Brendan Rodgers and Royce Lewis being on the trading block. I definitely think that Lewis should have a much higher price than Rodgers. Rodgers is essentially, I don't want to call him a failed prospect yet, but he's been absolute garbage in the majors, and it's kind of looking like maybe he's not going to have a ton of playing time in the next year. His prospect status is just about exhausted, if not completely yet. And yeah, I think he's a guy that maybe won't be worth a ton, unlike Lewis, who has not played in the majors yet, and he's still MLB has him as a top 10 prospect still. He hasn't done anything to kind of take away that ranking. So I think if they want to trade away one of those guys, then Lewis could certainly get them a much, much higher, much, much better piece back.
I'd agree. Rodgers, I know, was a top 10 prospect. I know Cam and I a couple off seasons ago had a big Patrick Corbin for Brendan Rodgers debate. And I know he and I still have an ongoing bet about who will have more career WAR, Brendan Rodgers or his teammate Garrett Hampson. But I agree. I think Rodgers' value's at a low. A 25 WRC plus and 81 at bats last year isn't good. And this year in 21 at bats. He had a negative 61 WRC plus, did not walk once, .095 average and .095 OBP. So, he's still only 24. And you're right, his prospect eligibility is about to be exhausted, which I think is going to limit his value. And I also think it'll limit his market, because I think the teams that can maybe take a chance on him are more like the Andrews or the Connors of the league, who maybe aren't expecting to compete this year, and therefore they're able to kind of take that gamble. But I don't see any of the top teams really being super interested in taking that gamble, because they'll have to stash him. And, if your goal is to win now, you don't want someone who, might have his negative 61 WRC plus on your roster. So it'll be interesting. As I mentioned, I think Andrew would probably be the best trade fit there, given his Rockies fandom. And he, just acquired a bunch of second-round picks from Eric this year. So I think a trade match could be seen there, but, we'll see. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, certainly. I think you could definitely find someone who would be a good match for those trades.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'll quickly speak on Lewis as well. Top 10 prospect. I still think the shine's a little off on him. I don't think the minor league numbers were as impressive in 2019. I know that he was playing hurt. I know that Zach is a Twins fan, so that might complicate their decision to trade him and might require an even higher price than it would be just because of that. But I think he's still a worthwhile target. Someone with the top 10 prospect pedigree is still going to sell high in this league, given our love for prospects. So I don't think they'd have a problem selling either player if they wanted to, but it's just a question of finding the right deal.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess this does signal that they do want to get better in the present. So that could have implications on their 2021 season in terms of filling holes in their roster.
Definitely. I think the 5 to 8 range is all very closely bunched right now. And any move that any of those teams can make to, really help their team would kind of definitely help them be one of the teams that's in the playoffs and not looking on the outside. So this is definitely an interesting development for Benintendi's Chicken Tendies.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be talking to Alex later on in the show about all that.
Yeah.
And yeah, did we want to talk a little bit more about Jake's supposed interest in Chris Sale?
Yeah, sure. I think Chris Sale is an interesting name. I mean, obviously, we know what Chris Sale is like when he is on. He's probably a top 5 pitcher in this league. He's 32 now, so he's a little on the older side. He's not supposed to come back until the middle of the year. And by the time he does come back for a full season, which would presumably be in 2021, he'll be 33 years old. So that's not the type of player that I think Andrew really should be gambling on, like long-term, given his status as a rebuilding team. But then I think the question is, when are you going to trade him to get peak value? Would it be more in the middle of the season when he comes back? Or would it be now before maybe some of the process with him with the rehab and coming back kind of comes down. So I think Andrew should be a little selective there, just trying to find the right deal. I don't think he should be in a rush to trade him. But if I'm Clayton and Jake and I just lost by Clevenger for the season, Chris Sale is probably the best arm remaining on the trade market. I'm not saying any player's untouchable, but like realistic trade targets at this point that I think could match or exceed Clevenger's production upside-wise. I think it makes sense for them to go after him, but I don't know if they'll find quite the balance this offseason to make a deal. I think this is something we could see happen more in June or July.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely find it a little interesting that after losing Clevenger, they want to go after maybe the riskiest starting pitcher available on the market that could have the potential to backfire by quite a bit. But I think that they do understand that it is important to go after someone, and they were very busy this past month, and I certainly expect them to do some wheeling and dealing in the upcoming days.
Definitely. And the one thing Clayton and Jake seem to preach is like getting value. So I think at the end of the day, if they feel like they can get value, they'll happily pull the trigger, but they're not going to force it. So we'll see what Andrew's asking price is. I know Jake definitely said sometime this month he'd be asking on him. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. And is there anything else you wanted to talk about before we kind of explain what we're doing today?
Yeah, why don't we talk briefly about the new leagues that have come up? I know we're going to talk about this later in the podcast with Alex, who has graciously agreed to lead the Dynasty Basketball League. But just want to get your thoughts on that, Cam, because I know you are participating. I know you're in the hockey league. You're in the basketball league as well. Is that correct?
Yes, I am. I'm in both. I am. I'll be co-owning a team with my brother in the basketball league. He does not go to the University of Michigan, but he's a big basketball fan. And I'll be on my own in the hockey league.
I got you. Yeah, I'll be on my own in both the leagues. I know next to nothing about hockey, so I'm about to give myself a crash course in that over the course of this break. I know a little more about basketball. I actually co-own a team in another basketball league or Dynasty Basketball League, so I'm looking forward to getting to learn more about basketball as well. And I just love competing with this group of guys. So I feel like we have a lot of fun with it. And I think even if we don't know too much about some of these sports and, even if there is a bit of a learning curve, it's still going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I certainly think so. Maybe we can dedicate an episode to each league in the future. That'd be a lot of fun.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I think there'll definitely be a learning curve for me in basketball. Hockey, a little less so, just because I feel like even though I don't know a ton, I do know more than most teams in the league. And God, it's gonna be really interesting. I'm curious to see what rivalries develop, because I'm not in the football league, but I'm sure the rivalries are very different than they are in the baseball league, and kind of who rises to the top.
Yeah, I'll say in the football league, it's the finals. The first 2 years have been involved the same teams that have been in the finals of the baseball league. So me, EBO, and Eric with Duncan. So it hasn't been too different there, but I'm sure like in hockey, for sure it'll be different because like me, Eric, and Zane all know nothing about hockey. And then in basketball, too, I'm sure that it's going to be a bit different. I'm sure you'll see some of these rivalries that pop up end up not being too different. Like, I know I'm going to want to beat Zane and Eric's guts no matter what, and same with you. Yeah, I'm
going to complain about Eric's basketball team quite a bit.
I'm sure. And I don't know how much complaining I'll do in hockey because I won't know what to complain about, but I'll find something to complain about. But,
Eric's going to get guys who get a bunch of steals in basketball and nothing else, and it's somehow he's gonna pick him up for free, and it's somehow gonna get him a championship.
Oh man, we have to figure out what the equivalent of holds is in a Dynasty basketball too.
I think the equivalent of steals is steals, but
yeah,
for holds, I don't know.
Oh man, no, it'll Eric will definitely find those nuggets. I'm sure he'll even if he doesn't know a whole lot about basketball, I'm sure he has like a decent basketball knowledge, but like he has a good command of like fantasy, kind of how to play the categories league. So I think he'll be fine. But I know for some of us who are all just about acquiring the best player and like the future is irrelevant, like screw picks, that might be a little harder to identify those players. And maybe you'll see a team like me be a bit more conservative and these basketball and hockey leagues, but
we'll maybe you'll be our hockey prospect guy. Who knows?
That'd be quite the switch. Yeah, maybe I could be more patient in those leagues if I know I'll just be winning championships galore in the baseball league.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe you'll try and build something long term. We'll see.
Absolutely.
And yeah, are we ready to talk about our Thanksgiving special?
Yeah, let's do it. I can kind of give the rundown of what this is going to look like. So we have made a ton of trades and acquisitions over the past calendar year. I'll pull up the exact number here. We've made 155 trades, which is 54% of the trades that have been made in this league's history. And while not every trade worked out for everyone, there's at least one player that each team has acquired via trade over this past calendar year that I think that they should be particularly thankful for. And while it would be easy for me just to highlight all the best players that everyone acquired, my goal was to discuss some of the moves that maybe flew a bit more under the radar, because these teams also made bigger moves, and because there's so many trades that happen, and talk briefly about how they might kind of impact each team's roster or each team's decision-making moving forward. So we've been going in the order of our reverse order of our power rankings the past couple of weeks when we've done these types of activities. So I thought it would be fun to go in the opposite order. We're going to start with me having won the league, and then we're going to work our way down to Andrew. So I guess we'll kick it off here. The player I'm the most thankful for is Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman was a player I acquired on May 16th from Anthony. I traded Miguel Sano, my 2021 first-round pick, EBO's 2021 first-round pick, and Andrew's 2021 second-round pick to Anthony for Matt Chapman. And the reason I was thankful in particular was because it helped me reverse one of the worst moves that I've made in this league's history. Matt Chapman was actually a player that I drafted in the 21st round of our prospect or of our inaugural draft, in between my 20th round pick of Jackie Bradley Jr. and my 22nd round pick of Michael Waka. So Chapman was clearly better than those two, but I kind of destroyed that value when I traded Matt Chapman and Trevor Williams to Connor for Jesus Sanchez. So I was very thankful to get him back. He was definitely an upgrade over Miguel Sano. I know Chapman didn't have the best year this year. He suffered through an injury, and his season actually ended early, which led to me starting Yellow Champ legend Joey Wensleydale at third base down the stretch. But he had a 138 and a 125 WRC plus in 2018 and 2019. And I expect him to return to those numbers next year, and he'll be 27 on opening day. So I am very thankful to have him back on my roster, plugged in at third base.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a good pick, especially since I guess Muncy is your only other third base eligible player right now. So I think he's a good guy to have back. And even if he had a down year this year, he's a guy you're going to be really counting on in the years to come.
Yeah, I'm really high on him still, and I think he's going to be a great asset for this team and hopefully help me win another championship. But let's go to our next team here, EBO. The player that they are most thankful for is Wilson Contreras. When Zane told me that Contreras was going to be his pick, the main reason he told me he picked him was that it really solved what's been a big kind of roster hole for them, which is catcher. I know they've had guys over the years such as Yadier Molina, past his prime Buster Posey. They've had Sean Murphy on their roster. Travis d'Arnaud was their starting catcher this year. And as much as they like d'Arnaud, he was a little bit on the older side, and they weren't sure if he was necessarily going to repeat what he did this year in Atlanta. But Wilson Contreras has been one of the most consistent catchers in fantasy baseball over the past, 3 to 5 years. He's probably a top 3 to 5 major league catcher right now. And for a team that's putting a lot of emphasis on building a top shelf offense to go with a strong relief core, I think that this was a very great move to shore up a hole and ensure that they have no weaknesses in their lineup. So, Contreras is a great catcher, and I'm sure they'll be counting on him for the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've already talked on the show about how much I like Contreras. He He got my vote for catcher of the year in our season end voting. I think he maybe is the second best catcher in the entire league. And I think he certainly helps out that position a lot. I mean, it'd be nice. Maybe Sean Murphy's a guy they would have wanted to keep, but God, he's been steady. Contreras has, and I think it's really hard to find a better guy at that position. They're lucky to have him.
Absolutely. You want to move on to your team? I can let you announce your player.
So the player I am most thankful for this Thanksgiving is Liam Hendriks. I originally acquired him back in the end of January. You traded him to me, and he was maybe the fourth biggest name in that trade, arguably the fifth if you count Kyle Lewis twice, since he was traded for himself in that deal. But Hendriks, especially, I was a little worried about acquiring him since the offseason prior. I acquired Blake Trinan. He absolutely sucked for me. I gave up quite a bit for him. But this year, Hendriks was the exact opposite. He won reliever of the year for our league, maybe even in real life too, I'm not sure. But he had 14 of my 20 saves this season, an ERA well under 2, and he's gonna leave as a free agent this year, certainly get a closer spot somewhere else, and maybe get 50 saves. I'm very high on him. That 0.67 whip is just remarkable. It helped me finish near the top in that category, just behind Ruthvik. And Liam Hendriks, I think maybe it's hard to imagine closers being this good 2 years in a row, but he is a guy who was massive for my team, and I think he's going to be a huge part of it next year as well.
Definitely. When I traded you Hendriks in that big Rizzo for Torres deal, I didn't expect. I thought Hendriks would be good. I just didn't think he was going to keep it up to this degree, but he proved me wrong. So, like you said, great contributor for your team this year, and I expect him to be a solid contributor for you next year as well. But let's move on here to the next team, Ruthvik and Nick. The player that they were most thankful for is D.D. Gregorius. They acquired Gregorius from Connor in the see if I can find this here. Right before the trade deadline, they traded their 2022 first-round pick to Connor for D.D. Gregorius and Seth Corey. And a deal I really liked for them at the time. They had some interesting names as shortstop. So Bregman was shortstop eligible this year and last year, but he's not shortstop eligible this year or for this coming year because he only played third base this year. So had they not made this move, they really would have had to have been more active this offseason in trying to get a shortstop. But Gregorius really plugged in a big lineup hole for them this year. They were starting Ahmed Rosario, who just absolutely cratered this year. So he was a huge upgrade there. He had a 335 OBP, 10 homers, 38 ribbies, 3 stolen bases, all solid numbers. And, for a team that we talk about that really has the top-end pitching and also has a few top-end bats but really lacks offensive depth, having guys like Gregorius to paper over some of those holes really helps. And, I think he'll be a solid contributor for this team next year as they try to avenge their semis loss to EBO.
Yeah, we'll be talking to Ruthvik later in the episode. And Gregorius, yeah, he had 10 doubles this year, which is a great number for this team. They already hit a lot this year, finishing third in the league in doubles and just right outside of the top 2. And I'm curious to see where Gregorius lands this offseason, just because that could have an impact on what position he does play and how much playing time he gets. Kind of surprised to see this as Ruthvik's pick, but hearing your explanation of it makes sense.
Yeah. Again, he's definitely acquired some bigger players over the course of 2020. I mean, we all remembered the Ronald Acuna deal. He's probably the best player that Ruthvik acquired. Given that D.D. Gregorius really filled that hole for him at a critical time, I think we could all agree it's a pretty solid pick. But let's move on to our next team here. Yuki the player he should be most thankful for is Austin Nola. And I don't think we should be surprised that I picked a catcher for Yuki, given that he loves catchers more than anybody else in this league. He already has JT Realmuto, but he agreed to acquire Austin Nola and Daniel and Alex's 2022 second from Ruthvik for Anthony Santander and starting pitcher prospect Kyle Mueller. You know, Nola had a very solid season split between Seattle and San Diego. You know, he's a bit of a late bloomer. But he's someone that I think could be a top 10 catcher over the next couple of years. I thought the move to San Diego would severely cut into his playing time, but they ended up using him basically like an everyday catcher. And, you know, it's not like the other options that they have there really like stand out as like, wow, like, you know, they could potentially earth up Nola. And if Nola isn't playing every day at catcher, he has the flexibility to play first, second, and third as well. Or if the NL has a DH next year, he could DH too. So he'll start the season only catcher eligible, as will JT Realmuto. So my guess is Yuki will work him into the lineup in one of his util spots. But, you know, solid player. Maybe Yuki ends up trading him or Realmuto, you know, sometime during the season or down the stretch. And I think it gives him a lot of flexibility. And, you know, given Yuki's love for catchers, I don't know if there's another obvious pick to select here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I like this pick that much. Just Nola's season kind of cratered once he went to San Diego. And just the fact that Yuki loves catchers so much makes Nola kind of replaceable in a way. He's got so many catchers. God, and the fact that he's going to be the second best catcher on his team regardless. But I think it makes sense a little bit, especially if he gets first base eligibility back. It looks like, I don't know how to read the positional eligibility chart, but that PP next to his name makes me think he'll have first base eligibility next year. Maybe not.
He didn't play the requisite number of games there this year. He needed to play 10. His primary position going into this year was first base, hence the PP on there. I guess I'll give a quick plug too for the multi-position eligibility Fangraphs list I posted in the league chat a couple of days ago. The 10-game column should have the eligibilities for all of our players with potential eligibility issues for next season. So looking forward, that's a good chart to consult when making some of these trades.
Interesting. Yeah, that does make it a little tough, especially since that means his only first base eligible player will be Christian Walker, which not super thrilled about that. But yeah, I think Nola is going to really have to have a good season for Yuki this year.
I agree, and who knows, maybe Nola ends up being a trade chip or Realmuto does, because I think, like you said, there are some spots in his offense where he could, build a bit more depth. For example, I'm pretty sure his starting shortstop is Willie Castro. And nothing against Willie Castro, but, like, you could do better than Willie Castro, I'm willing to bet. So, let's go ahead to our sixth-ranked team here. Alex Fischer, the player that him and Zach should be most thankful for this Thanksgiving is Casey Mize. They acquired Casey Mize from the executive batting order, and one of the more shocking trades of the offseason, I thought. Casey Mize was one of the, and arguably the top Dynasty starting pitcher prospect going into the season. So I know that there are concerns with him maybe not developing a third pitch necessary to be an elite starter, and also some concerns with kind of the numbers that he posted in this shortened season. But the upside is tremendous. There's a reason he was the number one overall pick for the Tigers back in, I want to say 2018. So I think he could easily be the crown jewel of their rotation for years to come.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. This was your pick, not their pick?
Yeah, this was my pick. Most of the teams I tried to get a pick for, there are a couple teams who didn't submit names, so I made picks for them. This was one of the teams I made the pick for.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think Mize, he obviously struggled this year, but once again, it's a weird season. He's a rookie. I'm not going to hold that against him too much. But I think, yeah, especially since Bumgarner seems to be on his way out. For those of you who read the Gallardo Awards, you're going to be reading a little bit about him. And the rest of his rotation is pretty young. I think Mize could be a great fit in that, potentially as the number one guy, and in a rotation that maybe 2 years from now could be the envy of the league.
Absolutely. A lot of solid young prospects and players. I know Framber Valdez is in their rotation. And let's see some of these other names here. Julio Urias. I know Scherzer's a little bit on the older side, but they also have Justice Sheffield, Jamison Tyone, Eduardo Rodriguez. So, I mean, that's a solid young rotation right there if they all pan out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's move into these non-playoff teams now. The number 7 seed this year was Cam's favorite team, Eric. And his the player that he was the most thankful for is Zach Plesac.
Very glad he didn't say Dylan Moore.
Hey, Dylan Moore for Hinge on Rue. I'd still like to see that trade go down this offseason. But Eric acquired Zach Plesac and Bill with the Flow's 2021 and 2022 seconds, as well as Andrew's 2022 second for Lance Lynn, Dylan Bundy, and Eliza Hernandez. So he gave up a couple solid starters to get him, but I think Zach Plesac was the best starting pitcher in that trade. He's only 25. He's pitching for an Indians team that does a great job at developing starting pitching. And I think this is part of what Eric has, like a solid shift for Eric in building a really nice rotation here of high upside arms. He's got Tyler Glass now, Corbin Burns, Pablo Lopez, and Zach Plesac leading the bunch, with other kind of names that might, end up having some solid seasons, including Shohei Ohtani, Griffin Canning, Drew Smyly, Jordan Montgomery, Joe Musgrove. For a team that maybe shifted a bit away from, their identity this season, they traded away their best starting pitcher and best bat from year 2, Jacob deGrom and Trevor Story. I think anything that Eric can do to rebuild some of that depth in the pitching rotation will be very helpful. And I think it'll give him another strong category to compete in, quality starts and strikeouts over the next year. And depending on how some of these guys break out, we could be looking at this as one of the top 4 rotations in the league. I wouldn't put it past him. So that's who Eric picked. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Cam?
Yeah, I think Plesac is a great pick. He's a guy I like a lot. I owned briefly last year as a spot starter, and I'm really wishing – last year meaning 2019 – and I'm really wishing I had held on to him. He turned into a stud. And I think it's important to point out that when I criticize Eric's team, I'm solely criticizing his lineup, because that pitching staff is really solid. Even if it's maybe not one of the top 2 in the league, it's kind of close. Maybe at 3 or 4. And some of those guys, Plesac, Glasnow, Pablo Lopez, could be a really one of the better tops of the rotation that any team does have.
Yeah, and I guess you and I both had Zach Plesac and Pablo Lopez at different points between 2019 and 2020, and we both gave up on both of them. So kudos to Eric for being able to acquire both of them. I know those are some drops I'd love to have back, and I'm sure the same goes to you. But let's move on to the number 8 seed in the league this year, Clayton and Jake. The player that they should be the most thankful for is Gleyber Torres. Now, had Mike Clevenger not got hurt a couple of weeks ago, this might have been a tougher decision, but I think Gleyber was clearly the best player or the best dynasty asset, at least, that they have acquired. I think that he pairs very nicely with Bo Bichette in the middle of that infield. And that should be one of the best young middle infield tandems in this league for years to come. And, it's kind of he's one of the centerpieces of an offense that, you know, has some pretty decent names here. You know, Matt Olson at first, Javi Baez. We all kind of know what season he's coming off of, but he's, you know, put up an MVP season before. JD Martinez, Michael Brantley, Yordan Alvarez. So, you know, I think that, you know, Torres will be a building block for them for years to come, and they should be thankful that they were able to acquire like a young stud like him. I know the price to get him was pretty steep. They gave up Wander Franco to get Glaber and Mike Clevenger, and there might be some increased pressure to really see Glaber take off this year to justify that trade, just because Clevenger is hurt. But either way, I don't think they're going to be upset owning Glaber Torres.
Yeah, sometimes I think about if Duncan were to look at the league right now, a year after leaving, what he would be the most surprised at. And I would say just the amount of times that Glaber Torres has been moved since he was on our team. He was a fixture on our team the first 2 seasons. But yeah, Glaber had a bit of a down season, although he had the high on base percentage and the home runs were way down. But I think he still had a decent enough year. And I think certainly playing 19 games against the Orioles next year, if there's a full season, will help him out immensely. I did give him up because I wasn't the most convinced that he could kind of continue getting better and that maybe some of his underlying numbers weren't as great. But I think he's a guy any team would be lucky to have. And I think if they decide they don't like what they're doing, they could probably get a massive haul for him.
Oh, absolutely. We saw the massive haul that Eric paid this past offseason to get Glaber. I think they could definitely get something just as good for him, because I don't think Glaber's value has decreased. But I'll definitely agree with you. I'm sure that's one thing Duncan would be surprised about, because he went from your team to my team. I thought I was going to keep him for like the years to come, but then Eric came out with the good offer, so shipped him off to Eric. And then Eric, after a few games, just shipped him right off to Clayton and Jake. So he's now been on a third of the teams in this league, and we'll see if he has any more stops in his journey through this league.
Yeah, absolutely. What team's next?
Next team is Anthony. The player that Anthony should be the most thankful for is AJ Puck. Now, AJ Puck at first glance might not be the player you look at and was like, oh, wow, like he should be the player you're most thankful for. He's dealt with some injury issues over the past couple of years, but there's a reason he's one of the top prospects in the league. He's got an electric arm, and he has the potential to pair with Jesus Luzardo in that Athletics rotation for years to come and be a dominant ace up there. And for a team that, you know, drafted starting pitchers really strongly, traded some of them away, and has acquired some new ones that have seemed to have their fair share of injury issues, looking at Carlos Martinez, looking at James Paxton, looking at Corey Kluber, looking at Mike Soroka. If AJ Puck can stay healthy and be productive, he could really be a stabilizing force in that rotation and really help Anthony get back to playoff form. I mean, he was a playoff team as recently as last season, 2019. He actually won a playoff matchup against Ruthvik in the first round before losing to me in the semifinals. So, you know, if Puck can help turn that rotation around, there's no reason that Anthony can't compete for one of the playoff spots.
Yeah, certainly. Anthony's got a really, really nice young rotation with Soroka, Dane Dunning, Trevor Rogers, Tarek Skubal, and of course, AJ Puck. There definitely are concerns about injuries and maybe concerns about Puck moving to the bullpen. But yeah, I would certainly say that he's a great acquisition for that team, and he slides right in.
Let's move on to the next team here. The 10th seed this year was Alex and Daniel, and a player that they should be the most thankful for is Cody Bellinger. Alex and Daniel have made the fewest trades over this time span, so there wasn't a bunch of names here to pick from. But I think Cody Bellinger is just obviously the best pick. I think I mentioned on the podcast a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the Fernando Tatis trade, you know, I was like, you don't fuck up an opportunity to get a top young player in this league if they come available. And sure enough, Connor made Cody Bellinger available, and they were right to jump on him. They gave up on August 9th. They traded Luis Robert, Jesus Luzardo, David Fletcher, Carlos Rodon, and Austin Riley to Connor for Cody Bellinger, Mitch Keller, Jesus Sanchez, and Dansby Swanson. I know that Cody Bellinger is coming off a bit of the down year with the Dodgers, but he was the NL MVP in 2019, I believe. And there's no reason to believe in a lineup with such names as Mookie Betts and Max Muncy, Justin Turner, Will Smith, that he can't, really bounce back and post another All-Star, maybe even another MVP season. And he's still ridiculously young. Again, just a great player, and they are lucky to have him as the face of their franchise.
Yeah, it's kind of nice that when Bellinger became available, this was the team that won the sweepstakes as opposed to one of the usual suspects, you or EBO. Kind of nice that some of these guys are getting spread out around the league. Bellinger's a phenomenal player. Hard to argue with that. Even if he did have a down season, he did still score a lot of runs and a lot of RBIs just because of what that lineup is. And, I mean, they named their team after him. They like this player. And he's one of their 12 Dodgers in their lineup and in their pitching staff. And I think, what else is there to say?
Let's move on to the next team here. The 11th seed was Connor. And the player that Connor were most thankful for was Jose Barrios. Jose Barrios was a player they recently acquired from the executive batting order. On November 13th, EBO sent Barrios, Travis d'Arnaud, Keegan Aiken, and Connor's 2021 second to them for Bobby Witt Jr., Jose Leclerc, and Jonathan Scope. Now, we've talked about how, Bobby Witt is one of the best prospects in Connor's farm system, and maybe, wasn't worth it to give him up. But I would argue that this is a pretty strong move for Connor. What this move signals to me is that Connor is now ready to make more of a push towards competing rather than asset accumulation. He's built a nice young rotation with Giolito, Barrios, Michael Kopech, Tristan McKenzie, Nate Pearson. Let's see if I remember correctly, Forrest Whitley is also in this minor league system. So there was a solid group of starting pitchers there, and I think all of them are like 26 or 27 or younger. So this is a team that could really sneak up over the next couple of years, and I don't know if they're necessarily going to be a playoff team in 2021, but I could see 2022, 2023 if Connor, cashes in these prospects strategically or, makes some solid ad drops, adds a bit more to that offense beyond just the White Sox guys or some of these prospects come up and pan out. We could be talking about a playoff team here in the next couple of years. So I think Barrios, as a 200 inning guy who's only, I think, going to start next season at 25 or 26, is someone who will be a consistent guy in Connor's rotation if he doesn't trade him for the years to come.
Yeah, I think that's a great pick. You pretty much summed it all up. His team is kind of transitioning into a not necessarily buyers yet, but maybe the 2019 Reds, kind of building themselves up. And Barrios is a great face of that. And just looking at this rotation, that's top 3 upside already this year, I think. I mean, you mentioned those. I'm not sure if you mentioned Brady Singer, but he was really great this year as well.
Yeah.
61 strikeouts in 64 innings, low whip. And yeah, the hitting has a little bit of a ways to go, but I think this team could legit compete for a playoff spot this coming year.
Wow. Yeah, that's with some careful management by Connor, I definitely would agree with that statement. But let's get to our last team here. The 12th seed this year was Andrew. And the player that he was the most thankful for was Michigan man Jake Cronenworth. Jake Cronenworth really burst onto the scene. The Padres acquired him in a Tommy Pham deal, and while Pham spent a good chunk of the season hurt, Cronenworth really shined when they let him play. He got Jake Cronenworth on August 25th. Both the Flow traded Cronenworth, Jordan Romano, and Cole Winn to Andrew for Alex Verdugo and Zach Davies. Cronenworth had a very solid season, as I mentioned. He bounced around. When Hosmer was out, he played first base. He played a lot of second base. He's also played some games at shortstop. So he'll go into next season actually being eligible at first, second, and shortstop, which is not something that you see from a lot of players, especially the shortened season. Not a lot of players are eligible at three positions. So I think that Andrew can really use that to his advantage moving forward when he's kind of constructing the roster that he wants to use this season. For example, he acquired Ozzie Albies. So now, he could just kick Cronenworth out to short or first base. Gives him some depth there. And, Cronenworth will be 27 on opening day. That's still fairly young. So I think that, he could be a potential building block for Andrew as he starts this long rebuilding process. And one more thing I'll add, Cronenworth doesn't just hit. He's a pitcher as well. They didn't let him pitch this year because of the pandemic, but maybe he pitches out of the bullpen a bit next year and adds even more flexibility to that roster and kind of a Shohei Ohtani-like role if Shohei ever stayed healthy. So Jay Cronenworth was Andrew's pick.
Yeah, maybe he does. I think it's a good pick. Yeah, you hit on the flexibility quite a bit. Having a guy who can play those three positions is incredibly valuable, maybe more so for a winning team than a team in his position, which is why maybe I could see him being a guy to flip. Not that I expect Andrew to. I don't necessarily expect him to be a future star, but I think he's certainly a very valuable player. He finished either runner-up or third place in Rookie of the Year this season. And yeah, he's a solid player. Any team would be lucky to have him.
Definitely. So those are the 12 players that were voted for the most thankful. I'd like to thank everyone who submitted a name and would be curious to hear your all's thoughts on my analysis, especially for the teams who I picked a player for. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add, Cam?
Nope. This was a fun segment, and coming up after the break, we're going to have Ruthvik on to talk about his team.
Come and stay with us. It's such an easy flight. Cute new places keep on popping up since the Exodus. It's all getting gentrified. I put a taqueria on the roof. It was well reviewed. 4 stars out of 5.
All right, we're here now with Deep Sea Devers co-owner Ruthvik Interview. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Pretty well.
Doing pretty good.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty quiet off season for you so far. But do you expect things to kind of heat up at any point soon?
I think so. I think I've been getting a lot of really good offers the last at least like 3-4 weeks, and I haven't really been compelled to pull the trigger. There are all a lot of trades for like good pieces and stuff, or it was just like massive overhauls, and I'm pretty satisfied with it where the team's at right now going into next season. But of course, like looking at like Sahil's team, for example, there's a lot of improvements, but I'm not that trade savvy like he is. So
Oh, I appreciate the compliment. So let's dig into some of the trades that you've made. I think the biggest move that you made, and certainly one of the more kind of interestingly constructed deals, was the O'Neal Cruz trade. You conditionally traded O'Neal Cruz, your 2021 third-round pick, and 2022 third-round pick to both the Flow for Zach Davies and Taylor Rogers, with the condition that if Cruz's legal issues prevent him from playing in 2021, but with the flow can void the trade and reverse every aspect of it. And if they happen to trade either pick they acquired or Cruz, the condition no longer exists and the trade is fully complete. So we're just curious to hear maybe your thought process behind that deal and what effect you expect that to have on your roster. And if you have any concerns maybe about how that condition might affect your roster building kind of moving forward.
Yeah. So I, at that time, was thinking I needed another arm for my rotation, and I wanted to improve the bullpen. I mean, as at that time, I believe I still had Mike Mayers on my team, and I thought I had about 4 guys in the bullpen, and I wanted a 5th to sort of round it out. And Taylor Rogers is a guy who I've always liked. I think even though he's not really the traditional closer in Minnesota, I thought that he'll at least get like a combined 25 holds and saves, which I believe is really valuable. As you can tell, I still have Nick Anderson, right? So I thought he would be a really good trade asset. And then Zach Davies his numbers don't really pop out of the screen, but he's a very good mid to low end starter for a really good rotation. And he was just the exact kind of guy I needed at that time to sort of round out my rotation. I know you guys have said like my rotation is just a bunch of really, really just mid-tier assets, and then the 3 or 4, depending on how much you like Zach Gallen and Dinelson Lamet, just 3 or 4 really good arms. But so I just wanted to keep building upon that. Trading O'Neal Cruz at that time was sort of a risk. He's had his legal issues, but I just felt like his value could really tank if I waited any longer, and I wanted to get as much as I could out of him. The condition could end up affecting me, but I think that if I remember right, is the pick this year's 3rd round pick?
Yeah, it's a 2021 3rd and a 2022 3rd that you gave up. So 1 in each of the next 2 years.
So I think if they use the pick, I'm not sure if the trade is fully complete then. I mean, I don't think either of us have discussed that. But obviously if they keep the player they draft, we might have to revisit that, see what they think. I didn't really think about it back then, but the condition, I don't really mind it because I don't plan on dropping Zach Davies or Taylor Rogers anytime soon, and they're not really the flashiest guys on the market, so no one's really been sending offers for them. I'm okay with keeping both of them as long as possible, at least for the next season, just to see how they fit in the team. I'm curious, what did you guys think about it?
Yeah, it was. I think at first glance, I was like, look, you're trading kind of a top 50 prospect for 2 solid players, but maybe not somebody who's like a really big time name. But then the more that I think about it with, prospects kind of being a little unpredictable, and, I kind of see where you're coming from, where you're liking Davies and Rogers, and Cruz's legal issues, where I don't think it's the, like a terrible trade or anything. Like, do I think maybe you could have gotten a little more? Sure. But do I think, as constructed, this is a pretty solid trade for both sides? Yes.
Yeah, I was definitely a little concerned that you were taking on all the risk of the legal issues thing. But, and the fact that I don't really think you need Davies too much. But, I mean, if you really like Rogers and, O'Neal Cruz is pretty volatile, I think it could work out pretty well for you.
Yeah, legal issues definitely had me. I guess I probably could have changed the condition a little bit, but at that time I just wanted to just trade him away to see what I could get.
I don't blame you for wanting to move him right now. Some of these legal issues can really, present some issues with kind of getting them on the minor league field and, really being able to contribute. So sometimes you kind of just want to sell when you can. But these discussions of the rotation kind of lead me to my next question. By my count, you have 17 starting pitchers between your major league roster and your minor league roster that have at least pitched in the major leagues. We have a 12 start a week limit and obviously some roster constraints. So I'm sure you're not keeping all 17, and I doubt that was your plan. But how do you expect to kind of deal with that logjam moving forward? I think it's a great problem to have a bunch of starting pitchers, but at some point you kind of have to choose the ones that you want to keep.
Right. Yeah, I think going into last offseason, I was around that number as well, or at least last season. My plan at this point, I'm not really looking for like immediate trade value out of these guys. I think I was obviously pretty happy with the way my rotation was last year. I think we built it to a point where we were pretty competitive with yours, at least the way that the sort of the league was set up, not with the head-to-head, but with the Rado. But you're right, it's going to be an issue when I have to pick. But I also realize starting pitchers are the ones that have the highest trade value in this league. And if, a couple of those guys can have 2 or 3 really good starts and people start to take notice that, these are good players to target, it's mainly for trade bait. If not, if it's a guy I think can keep it consistent, I want to be able to identify like my top 10 guys, hopefully midway through next season, see the guys who I can roll with, hopefully some of the younger ones. If I remember right, DeGrom might be my oldest starting pitcher. Most of the guys are under 30. So, if I can identify a top 10, then yeah, I'm always willing to trade 3 or 4. Like last season, I think I traded Nate Pearson. Oh, I don't remember what trade it was. I think it was in the O'Neill Cruz trade that I ended up trading away Nate Pearson. But it's just kind of like that. It's if they end up playing well, I can flip them immediately for a couple of good prospects. My farm system right now is as bad as yours, Sahil. So
I don't think any farm system in this league is as bad as mine. You at least have Dylan Carlson sitting there and Helio Ramos, Seth Corey. Like, I don't have anyone as good as that. Drew Waters, for all the shit Cam gave about him on the podcast a couple weeks ago, is at least a top.
I don't blame him. Waters is a great real life prospect. I've been trying to trade him for a while, and I think everyone else sort of views him the same way. When I got Waters in the trade, it was mainly I was hoping that a bunch of the guys who really look at Fangraphs rankings a lot, I was hoping I could flip Waters to one of them for anything, but it has not been working out so far.
Kind of like I've done with Jazz Chisholm a couple times now.
But Jazz Chisholm seems to be getting traded quite a bit, though. I've seen his name at least a couple of times.
I think it's easier to go after like someone who's shown a little more offensive promise, even if maybe they're a little more raw, than someone like Waters, who I think is a higher chance of kind of, actually being a legitimate major league contributor, but maybe not a solid like fantasy contributor.
Right.
Yeah. But a lot of, I think what happened for you last season was just a lot of the players that you gambled on kind of coming together and really just performing strongly. Like you traded for Dinelson Lamet and the Acuna Mookie deal, and he really went off. Zach Gallen you acquired, and he really went off. I know you had a couple bats. Austin Nola, since you recently traded away, really helped stabilize the catcher position when Sal Perez was hurt. Jose Abreu had an MVP-like season. Actually, I'm not – did he win the MVP?
He did.
He did.
All right, so Jose Abreu had an MVP season. And we all know what happened with Bieber and DeGrom. Are you concerned maybe with some of these players regressing? And do you think that you might be trying to acquire some more depth to kind of hedge your bets? Or do you feel kind of solid with these players and kind of the roster as it's constructed right now?
The concerns are fair. I definitely have concerns that there's going to be some sort of a regression, but I think I have the depth, like you just mentioned, with the starting pitchers, where I'm not as concerned with them because there will be some replacements. And even if Lamet, steps back a little bit, there's a couple of guys, I think, like Kim and Peterson, who've had really good years last year. They can keep it up and, sort of take his role last year. But regarding my bats, I think I only have one bench bat right now, and the rest I just have to hope they play to their potential. But I don't really know how much more I can add there. I don't like carrying too many bench bats. I think the most I've usually carried are 2. So I might end up looking to trade one of my starting pitchers for another established bat. I know you don't like Willie Calhoun at all, even though I think last year was really just completely injury injury-filled seasons. So I really liked his end of 2018. So if he can come back to that form, that's a guy who didn't perform last year, who can sort of contribute and say if someone like Conforto takes a step back, I can get the same numbers from Calhoun, I think, to fill sort of that gap in the team. Starting pitchers wise, I don't know. I don't really see any cause for concern outside of Lamet. I think Lamet hasn't shown it for a full season because of injuries. And while he was hurt towards the end of last year, when he was healthy, he looked even better than his peak beforehand. So that's a high risk, high reward that I'm willing to gamble on. Zach Gallen, you're completely right. Like, he's hasn't been in the majors for that long, but he had a great start. I don't remember what that was. It was like 30 straight starts or of 3 or less earned runs or something like that. I mean, that's something that absolutely is fantastic. And I'd love to, like, there's obviously going to be a little bit of regression, but it's not much where I'm concerned that he's going to drop off suddenly, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I mean, I think you definitely have built, quite a solid team here. There's a lot of top end talent, DeGrom, Bieber, Bregman, Devers, Acuna are about as good of a top 5 as anybody has in this league. And, I think that while you have some question marks, I think that that's true of every team. Every team is gambling on some players bouncing back, or some players who maybe did well in the short season and we're not sure if they're going to keep it up. So definitely think that you've put together a solid roster here. So my last question, and then I'll let Cam ask some, is when we did our power rankings a couple weeks ago, I believe I had you as the 5th ranked team behind me, EBO, Cam, and Eric, and I think Cam had you as his 4th ranked team behind me, him, and EBO. Do you agree with that ranking, or do you think you deserve to be higher, lower? What do you think about that?
I think it's about fair. I think that I would consider the top 5 to be the teams you just named. Obviously, with you coming out for the championship year, you're definitely going to be number 1 on pretty much almost all power rankings. I think we have to give Eric credit for the first 2 years. Once it goes back to head-to-head, he's pretty much undefeated. So he's obviously going to be a top 5 team. I know you disagree with the lack of talent, as he said, like that he has available, but I think his the way he's going to build up the team, you got to trust him that he's going to make a lot of changes. So I think he's definitely that like 4-5 range right now for me as well. My team just, it depends. Nick and I were talking about how we wanted to like go ahead, see if we wanted to make a lot of changes, but we're both pretty satisfied with where they are, the team. And we just want to see like how it goes head to head. I think my head to head record last year was pretty good. So I think it was good enough to be a top 5 team. EBO is going with a completely different strategy with the lack of starting pitchers. So that I think is going to be really interesting. They're going to dominate holds and saves, and their offense is, I think, pretty much it'll be competitive with yours. So with that like big question mark and the fact that they made it to the finals and beat us last year in the playoffs. But outside of that, I mean, Cam's rotation's amazing, and his bench, his bats, there's Soto. That's enough to carry a team. And then, so the top 5's fair. I personally have myself I think I have myself at 3 right now, just because I'm not fully sold on the EBO system of totally trading starting pitchers. So I have them at 4, but 3, 4, 5, I'll take that. I'll take that going into the season and just see where the team goes from there.
Wow, EBO at 4 is very surprising, I'm going to be honest. But I mean, if you don't like their pitching, that makes sense.
It's just a different strategy. I love the arms they have for the bullpen. I just don't know how much that strategy will work. Like, how compatible is it for this system?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I guess we'll find out soon enough.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, transitioning from who's on your roster to who may be on your roster soon. You have 1 draft pick this year. It's number 27. Do you plan on adding to that? I know Andrew has a bunch of picks now suddenly. Do you plan on sticking with just the 1 3rd rounder, or are there guys you want to target and try and trade back into the first 2 rounds?
I think I'm looking more at waiting towards to closer to the draft and seeing if anyone will trade me sort of a relief pitcher or something that can round out my bullpen. I haven't looked at this draft class that well. I know Nick really has, and he has said there are a couple of guys he'll target if they're available at that pick or a little bit earlier where we can package it to move up. I'm absolutely down to do that. I personally do not have much knowledge into this class. I looked into a lot last class, so I wanted a lot of those late round picks that I ended up using. But this year I was more for I'm willing to trade any second and third round pick to go get relief pitchers. But yeah, there are a couple of guys. And I think I am willing to trade like a couple of my mid-tier prospects if people want to trade that for pitchers or picks.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. This draft, everyone said it's tough to scout, and it's really hard to find someone who knows what they're doing, especially a month, 5 weeks before the draft. So maybe waiting and seeing is a good strategy. And yeah, I guess the last question I have is there any player who's on a different team, maybe someone you haven't reached out on yet, but you are trying to acquire them by the end of the offseason?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let me take a look really quickly. I mean, we all know my Nomar Mazara and Randy love out here, but
I don't think Randy's going anywhere.
yeah, I think his value is gonna drop a lot on the same team. So I still don't think he'll trade him. But outside of them, I think Mondesi's a guy I've always liked. I think Sahil knows, at least from a couple of years ago, Mondesi's a guy who just gives you those steals and just some sneaky power. Obviously last year was a total wash. And also with my shortstop situation, I believe Bregman loses eligibility next year.
Yep.
And when he does, that's going to be a problem because I can't switch him back and forth into a shortstop position, and I'd have Didi Gregorius just playing there full time. So Mondesi's a guy I've sort of asked Eric about, and now I think he's on Connor's team. So I'll definitely be looking into sort of finding out the price, see if maybe there's a guy in my rotation or a couple of players I can package. But outside of shortstop, I've been looking at outfield just as a backup for Willie Calhoun, and with that extra utility spot coming in, I would definitely want one of those spots to be filled with an outfielder. Outside of Santander, I don't know who else has really been available this offseason.
Yeah, I don't really know either. I haven't heard a ton.
That's why I've asked about Nomar Mazara so much, but I don't see Mazara playing more than like 40% of the games next year, so he's not really a logical trade asset.
I think the White Sox might have non-tendered him.
Did they really? Oh, wow.
They might have. I'd have to double check this.
It would be amazing if he gets picked up. I don't know, like the Royals or something. Give me some playing time, and then I'll gladly go for him. I will say the Hunter Dozier trade has made me a little less active because just immediately plugs in. It was like a 1-for-1 swap. I got rid of a little bit of depth, and I got that sort of fifth outfielder I wanted.
Yeah,
I think I agree.
Multiple positions too, because he's got. Let's see where he'll retain eligibility here, but yeah, he played 28 games at first, 18 games in right, 2 games in left, and 1 game at third. So he'll be first and outfield eligible next year, and only 29 years old. I thought that was a big pickup for you. I feel like that was kind of along the lines of what you were talking about, where you could maybe trade some of your mid-rotation arms for a bat or two where, you know, it kind of seems strategic for you to do so. So definitely a nice move.
If I could get sort of similar things, like just the low risk, sort of mid-reward kind of trades, I'm always down to do those. Another guy I've liked since the last, at least end of 2018, again, was Mark Hanna. And he's also someone I haven't really asked about in this league. And I think as far as outfielder goes, I think he's a really solid, I think, third outfielder on any competitive team. So it's a guy I've been keeping my eye on as well.
That's a good pick. Yeah, he had a 127 WRC plus this year with a 387 OBP, and then a 146 WRC plus a year before with a 396 OBP. So, for anyone looking for OBP, that's your guy right there. Wow.
Yeah, he's. I'm pretty sure it's no secret. His end of 2018, his second half, he had a 181 WRC plus. I think that's the kind of guy. Or end of 2019, 19. Wow, I totally forgot. Yeah. So that's the kind of guy I like, shows the really hot end to a season and then hopefully picks it up towards the next year. But I'll have to reach out to the team and see if there's a trade we can make there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I believe Alex and Daniel own him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about, Ruthvik, before we head out?
What do you guys think where do you guys see your team going next year? Like, are you either of you planning any sort of big changes, any trades coming up?
I personally don't have anything in the works. I'm happy with the way my team's constructed. Maybe it'd be good to add another bat, someone who can play outfield. But other than that, I feel like my team's good, and I don't want to do anything to jeopardize that.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the hunt for one more bat, preferably an outfield bat, just get a little more depth there, although I'm not super picky on that. But I really like my rotation and the bullpen arms I have and my offense as a whole. So I guess it's like never say never about making a major move.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a blockbuster tomorrow, probably, that you're gonna end up making. And it's just gonna be like you're gonna trade Tatis or something.
Well, I think the only way to trade Tatis at this point is to get either Acuna or Soto, and I don't think either of you are trading him.
No.
So
Not at all. Well, yeah, and I think we're all in the same boat with just needing that extra bat.
yeah,
Kind of hard to come by nowadays, but it's gonna be an exciting year next year. I think, even though we've talked about the top 5 teams, I think any team that gets into the playoffs next year is going to be very competitive. Like Bo with the Flow, we mentioned earlier with my trade, they're trending upwards a lot. And I lost to them in the playoffs, I think 2 years ago. It's a kind of, and they're really good. They're good enough to get there, definitely, and also good enough to surprise one of us. So it'll be interesting to see which team sort of takes that lead next year outside of the top 5 we've talked about.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like their team a lot less without Clevenger, but I think they could certainly pull off an upset in the playoffs or even be one of the top 4 seeds.
Mm-hmm.
definitely. I think a lot of these teams have improved this offseason, and the quality of ownership has definitely increased. So I think the league is only getting more competitive, as the years go on. So I'm excited to see how this plays out as well.
All right, well, thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. Looking forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on.
And thank you so much.
Chicken tenders in my hotel, yeah. Christina's in my bed watching TV shows when she hit the remote with her legs shaking.
Okay, we'd like to welcome back onto the show Alex Fischer, co-owner of Benintendi's Chicken Tendies. Let's first off start by talking about the name. That was Zach who came up with it, right?
Yeah, that was Zach. We were watching the Michigan-Wisconsin game, and at that point we were down by so much. Looking at the fantasy baseball team, and Zach brought up the comment of, we should probably change our team name because you don't have Ronald Acuna anymore. And why don't we do that? And then he came up with Benintendi's Chicken Tendies, and when he first said it, I mean, it was like, yes, that's the name. We're gonna go with it.
Yeah, it's a great name. I know Sahil really shared his fondness for it last episode. Does this kind of signal any sort of commitment to Benintendi in the long term for you guys?
That's a great question. I've been trying to read up on him a lot lately with his rib injury that he had, but for this upcoming season, I don't think we're gonna trade him. We're just gonna hold on to him, and I really don't know what his value is right now, to be honest. So we have him, and we just kind of thought, he can be an outfielder for our team.
Definitely. I mean, he's only 26 still. He's shown a lot of potential in the past, has had some good seasons. I think there's reason to believe that he could bounce back from this 2020 kind of disappointing season.
I certainly agree. He was hurt most of the year, but before that, and 2019 wasn't great, but 2018 was a phenomenal season for him, and he was the number one prospect in the league just a couple of years ago. So I certainly think that he's a guy you can build a team around still, even.
Definitely. Well, why don't we get into some of these trades here? We had you on one of the first podcast episodes to discuss the Jose Ramirez trade, so we won't get into that again. But you acquired your third base replacement for Jose Ramirez and Manny Machado. EBO sent Manny Machado, Sean Murphy, Jesse Hahn, Emilio Pagan, and Ezekiel Duran to your team prior to the name change. I believe this might be the last trade before the name change. And you sent them Paul Goldschmidt, Wilson Contreras, Gene Segura, Shane Baz, your 2023 first-round pick, and your 2025 first-round pick. I just want to get your thoughts on the trade, how it came about, and yeah.
Zane and I were in talks about Manny Machado. I can't remember why he was in discussions or brought up, but personally, I've always had an interest in Manny Machado. Just like watching him, I think he's a really fun player to watch. And I can't remember if I asked him what his price was, but then we were deep in trade talks and everything. And I guess a big reason why we wanted to was since we did lose Jose Ramirez, we felt like we wanted to get a replacement for Machado. And then I made the mistake too because I thought he was going to be shortstop eligible, so he was going to play shortstop. So I really should have looked before making that decision. But either way, we're really happy with Machado playing third base, especially losing Jose Ramirez. Well, trading Jose Ramirez to Eric. Yeah, and then Goldschmidt. He was an interesting player too because Zane had him originally, then he traded him to us, and then. Yeah, I think we had Josh Bell at that point too, so we included him because we were like, well, we can just have Josh Bell at first base. We do lose Goldschmidt, and we think he's a good candidate to have a bounce back season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'd say to your point about Machado not having shortstop eligibility, I still think you have a couple strong pieces at shortstop here, and Jonathan VR, who's always good for a bunch of stolen bases at 16 this year. And Jorge Polanco, who had a bit of a down year because of injury, but, he's really established himself in 2019 as a pretty solid shortstop option. So I definitely agree this really helps your infield, and definitely always good to get the best player into trade, which I think Machado was. And, Goldschmidt is definitely someone who's getting older. And like you said, you did acquire Josh Bell, and we can't forget the other big first baseman that you have in the trade. It looks pretty lopsided now where you got Dom Smith. So you definitely have some options there. And I think Cam and I both agreed when we talked about this a couple weeks ago that we really like the trade for both sides.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, let's talk about the other big trade that you made. This one happened about 10 days ago with me. I traded you Eddie Rosario, Eduardo Rodriguez, Jameson Taillon, my 2026 first-round pick, and my 2026 second-round pick to you all for Brandon Woodruff, Joey Wendell, and Heriberto Hernandez. I gave my thoughts about this trade on the podcast last week, calling it a win-win for both sides. But I'd be curious to kind of hear from your perspective, your thoughts on the trade.
I think we both got what we wanted out of it. We really wanted to get another outfielder for our team, and we felt that Brandon Woodruff, he was good, don't get me wrong, but we felt that with where our team was going in terms of our age and youth, like Woodruff, I think he's 28 now, and we felt that we really did want an outfielder. I wasn't sure if it was based off of age because I realized Jameson Taillon's 29. And then Era, I think he's like 27 or 28. I guess we really wanted to take a shot on either Taillon or Erod. We felt that Taillon has been dealt, a bad hand for several seasons now. That if he has one year where he's healthy, he could perform at a high level. And Erod, I mean, very unfortunate. He missed this season because of COVID, but it's sounding like his myocarditis has become less severe, been reduced. I'm not sure how you would term that or describe it, but yeah, we just felt that one of those two would probably have a good bounce back season. And yeah, I don't know. And then Zach also is a Twins fan, so I I feel that that played a role as well. You know, getting another twin on our team. Like we already have Max Kepler. Then we also have, oh gosh, who's the prospect?
Royce
Royce
Lewis.
Lewis.
Yeah.
Yep. So we were so that probably played a role as well. And yeah, Brandon Woodruff. I mean, he was a fantastic pitcher last season. So that was a really good. You, I would say, you got the best player out of that trade. In terms of what we did, he was the 12th starting pitcher. So he's a really good player to acquire.
Definitely, and I mean, I really agree with all of your analysis. I think what Erod was the finished sixth in the Cy Young voting in 2019, and Tyone had like a low 3 ERA in 2018. I think you're right. Even if one of those two bounces back, combined with Rosario and the picks that you got, this is going to be a really big move for your team. So that's kind of why I thought it was a win-win for both sides. And I think for the most part, everyone I talked to kind of agreed with that stance. So definitely a great trade, and always happy to make a move with you. But let's move a bit and shift gears towards the draft. You all have no picks in the draft this season. Are you all planning on maybe acquiring a couple picks in this draft, or are you kind of trying to take a Cam approach here and largely sit out of this year's draft?
I mean, it's such a difficult draft. I know, just not being able to have a lot of videos of players playing from this season, obviously with COVID, it's I know it's kind of tough to gauge players' value. But to be honest, we've been trying to trade some of our top prospects and getting draft picks for them. But even then, I'm still kind of hesitant. I'm like, could this player be better at this position than this current prospect we have? But yeah, that's just kind of where we stand right now. We ideally would like to get one pick in the draft just to get one prospect out of this class. But if not, it's not the end of the world or anything.
Yeah, I remember when you came onto the podcast last time, you talked about Bryce Jarvis being your guy you wanted, and he'd probably be available in the second round for you. If maybe Andrew wanted to send you a second rounder, he has a bunch of them. Is he still kind of a guy you like? Is there anyone else that you're targeting, or is it just kind of we'll see if we end up with a spot where we end up?
I would say I need to do more research on it. I need to evaluate the prospect class again, and also really think. Well, Zach and I really need to think about our prospects and what we feel like is best for us right now. Like, should we trade them and get positional players immediately? Should we try to still continue to do like a sort of rebuild where we're trying to get more prospects? Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Definitely. I think it's kind of hard, more so than previous years, just with COVID and kind of some of these prospects, as you mentioned, not, completing college or high school seasons or even being able to play in the minors after they were drafted. It's just kind of hard to evaluate. So it's really just kind of situational, taking it one step at a time. And I think it's been a consistent theme of everyone we've had on is that nobody really knows what the plan is for the draft and kind of how they're going to approach things yet, but they're just going to kind of take it as they come. So I'm definitely with you there. I know I've personally had different picks in this draft at different times, and it's just absolutely insane, just like how much movement there's been in this draft. So hopefully it settles down soon and people can make some more decisions, but definitely interesting. Anything else you wanted to talk about with the draft, Cam?
Yeah, that was the last question I had about the draft. But let's change gears and talk about players you want, maybe major leaguers you'd want on your team. Is there anyone that you perhaps would like to acquire on another team that maybe you haven't reached out about yet, but you think you might do so soon?
That's a great question. No, I haven't really thought about that yet. I will say that we would ideally want to get another starting pitcher for our team. Either that or I know a player that we've really been keen on, and Sahil knows, is Aaron Nola. Like, we've really been trying to get him for quite some time now. Yeah, I don't know. I think we really like the age, like how young Aaron Nola is. I mean, being the 14th rated starting pitcher. I mean, his K per 9. I don't have it up immediately, but it's looking like it's around 8 or 9. I don't know. We just always have been high on him. Yeah, I would honestly say Aaron Nola. He's our player.
Maybe in a Machado deal, maybe I'd consider trading him. Although I do like Aaron Nola, so I'd be open to discussing a Nola trade, perhaps. You never say never.
That's true. Yeah.
That'd be a big trade. Maybe hopefully that's planting the seeds right here on the podcast for something huge that goes down.
Maybe.
It'd be really interesting. I mean, I know we've had a couple players mentioned on this podcast where as soon as someone mentions it, I'm like, I haven't thought about that. And I've actually inquired on the player that they were thinking about inquiring on. So, yeah, maybe this might turn into something.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe it'll inspire you to inquire on Aaron Nola.
Oh, yeah. He's, and yeah, one of our seems like it would be like a every 2-week thing.
Yeah.
Another trade for Aaron Nola. Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't blame you. I'm the same way. I'll inquire on a player until I get that player. So, and I know there's a couple teams right now who have players I've been inquiring on, and I know Brandon Woodruff was someone I asked about a couple times this offseason before I finally got him. So, you never know how these things might work out. It's as this league has proven with its 63 trades this offseason. You just never know what's going on. Insane. But let's speaking of leagues here, the big news that come out of M-SABR this week is the addition of a Dynasty basketball and Dynasty hockey league. And I think we announced a couple days ago that you are going to be running the Dynasty basketball league. I know I've been in multiple leagues that you've run before, and I know you do a great job. So I'm incredibly excited to see the work that you're going to put into this league. Do you have any thoughts about, just kind of how you think the league is going to be structured, or things that you want to do with it, like roster sizes, positions, scoring, just like anything? I know a lot of this is still being decided, but just kind of curious to see if, you have any thoughts about the league.
Yeah, I would ideally want to have 9 categories to be scored. I think that was recently brought up. But yeah, I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. I haven't run a fantasy basketball league in a few years, but every time I did, it was fun. Definitely different with the dynasty aspect. I'm not quite sure how that is going to look like, given obviously the minor league system is completely different from the developmental league, or how we're going to draft players. We're just trying to incorporate college basketball into it. But yeah, I'm trying to remember every year that we did, it would be like one positional player for each of the main positions. So you'd have like one center, power forward, shooting forward, small forward, shooting guard, point guard, and then you would have like three forwards or 3 utilities. Something like that. Since I think we have 12 people in the league too. Yeah, 12 people. Okay.
Sounds like it's going to be quite a deep league then. You got that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know we've been talking about deep rosters.
And then I know Chris brought up a good point about the D League 2-way players. Both you and him did. Sahil.
Yeah. I don't know how many D-League players are actually going to make like a big impact. So I think Chris had a very good point about that, where maybe there doesn't need to be a dedicated spot to them. I think maybe we could get away just with having deep rosters and not really any sort of minor league kind of team, but definitely a draft, for these players is something we could discuss. But again, these are all decisions that we're going to keep discussing as a league, and I'm sure that, we'll kind of figure out what exactly we want to do. But I'm incredibly excited that we're getting this kind of rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, likewise, man. And even fantasy hockey too. Shout out to Andrew for running that.
I'm really looking forward to that. I know like half the league knows like nothing about hockey, so it's going to be it's going to be pretty interesting to see how this plays out. But I'm excited to learn more about hockey and some of these players and know more than just who Alex Ovechkin, Sidney Crosby, and Dylan Larkin are.
Yeah, it's going to be
dude.
fun. Yeah, me knowing some hockey things, but not a lot, will put me maybe in the top 3 or 4.
So Cam, what are the chances of Quinn Hughes getting drafted number 1?
Depends on who's number 1. I mean, I'm not gonna say whether it'd be a good pick or a bad pick, but I guess it depends on who's picking first.
Yeah, without knowing much about him, he'll probably be on my radar just because he's a name I now know a little more than most of the other names in the draft. But you know, in the Michigan connection, can't beat that. So, but we'll see. It'll be interesting. I know I'm going to spend a lot of time doing some research over the next few weeks. So I hopefully know what I'm doing, but I'm looking forward to it, and I know Cam and everyone else is as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And the basketball I'm gonna have to learn quite a bit about too. Luckily for me, my brother is going to be co-owning with me, and he knows way more about basketball than I do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, do you have anything else you want to say, Alex, before we wrap this up?
Just thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun, guys. Always glad to be on.
Yeah, no problem. Always great to have you.
Yeah, always love having people on to discuss their teams, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
Days of Macy's Day Parade, the night of the living dead is on it.